Greetings, friends and countrymen. Welcome to Conspiracy Corner News, episode 37. This is Bart Sabrell. Conspiracy Corner News briefly highlights the week's most significant and underreported news events throughout the world, focusing on special preparation for the difficult times ahead for all mankind. And that, again, is the topic of this week. I noticed the story nearly a week ago and was saving it for today because I only do a weekly report. And I was very proud to see my other alternative media colleagues catch the story, and they have certainly been sharing it around the web, and I think it is highly significant. Let's take a look at it. It says here, Germany to tell people to stockpile food and water in case of attacks. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, the German government plans to tell citizens to stockpile food and water in case of an attack or catastrophe, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung newspaper reported on Sunday. Germany is currently on high alert after 2 Islamic attacks and a shooting rampage by a mentally unstable teenager last month. Berlin announced measures earlier this month to spend considerably more on its police and security forces to create a special unit to counter cybercrime and terrorism. The population will be obliged to hold an individual supply of food for 10 days. The newspaper quoted the government's concept for civil defense, which has been prepared by the Interior Ministry. First, let's look at some of the hints here. They say in case of an attack or catastrophe, and then they talk about an unstable teenager last month. Certainly, they're not telling the entire population of the country of Germany to stockpile food and water for several days, going on 2 weeks, because of unstable teenagers. I don't think even Islamic attacks, which may happen once a month and still regrettably kills a couple of people, I don't think that would be the reason why they would tell the entire population to stockpile food and water for 5 to 10 days. I think this is the true reason here, catastrophe. Now, they're bringing it up and saying this is the reason why they're bringing it up, but just like I pointed out, I don't think they would tell everyone in the country to stockpile food and water for 5 to 10 days because of a terrorist attack or crazy teenagers. I think the real reason is this, and they're really just not going into detail about it. It goes on to say a spokesperson for the Interior Ministry said the plan would be discussed by the cabinet on Wednesday and presented by the minister that afternoon. He declined to give any details on the content. People will be required to stockpile enough drinking water to last 5 days. Little contradictory. I think they said 10 days earlier. According to the plan, the paper said the 69-page report does not see an attack on Germany's territory, which would require a conventional style of national defense as likely. Okay. However, the precautionary measures demand the people prepare appropriately for development, which means a future event that they predict, that they're not going into detail about, that could threaten our existence, threaten the existence of the entire country of Germany, and cannot be categorically ruled out in the future. So this is something we really need to take note of. You may remember last week and the weeks before we talked about how FEMA and the United States government is preparing for some sort of an emergency. They're not going into detail as to what it is. They don't want everyone to panic, and they don't want the stock market to crash prematurely. So they're just kind of hinting at it. And now at least Germany is being forthright about what to tell their citizens. Now here's a quote from Natural News. Now, Natural News, I believe, is a highly respected online magazine that I highly recommend. They cover alternative news and natural health about equally, things that are not really covered in the mainstream media. He receives a lot of criticism. In fact, the alleged news site, Reddit, will not even allow any posting of any kind from Natural News on their website. It's highly censored. It's extremely difficult for me to get an article on there about the moon landing fraud, even though it is fraudulent, and even though it was in their conspiracy section. So I really don't recommend that news site at all. But let's see what Mike Adams, a highly intelligent individual, has to say about what he perceives as happening in the future. He says, I know this with 100% certainty. Humanity is headed toward a time of tremendous suffering. What many Bible scholars call the end times is nearly upon us. War, starvation, desperation, and disease will multiply across our world in the very near future, causing unprecedented loss of life and the collapse of human civilization as we know it today. I think that's very important to listen to people who have predicted future events before, not because of any gift of prophecy, simply because of them being highly intelligent and being able to intellectually look further down the road than most people. In this article, which I'll link in the description of this video, here's a very important quote that we got and I've read before from Janet Napolitano, her outgoing statement the day she resigned. She went on to say, a natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has never seen, is likely on its way. Okay, so here's two important clues here. It's a natural disaster, and it's one of which the nation has never before seen. So in the nearly 240 years of the United States of America, we have seen volcanoes, we have seen earthquakes, we have seen hurricanes, we have seen tornadoes, and things of that nature. So what natural disaster have we not seen? And what natural disaster could you predict 2 or 3 years in advance? Well, you cannot predict earthquakes that far in advance, much less a day or two in advance, and the same with volcanoes, hurricanes, and the like. So the only natural disaster that she could know about years in advance that I'm aware of is something coming from outer space. That would mean it's either an asteroid, it's a comet, it's a rogue planet, and I will link in this video an article about what a rogue planet is, or it's a meteor storm, which is tens of thousands of asteroids hitting the Earth at the same time. So I think this is pretty significant. I went on to say in the article, when science and the scriptures say the same thing, I take notice. Here's a quote from Luke 21:11, talking about the end times before the Messiah returns. There will be an increase in earthquakes in various places. Science has said that, and they say they don't know why. They have increased by as much as 1,000% in the last 10 years. They don't know why, they say. Also, in Matthew 24:21, speaking of the last days before the Messiah's return, in the last days there will be great tribulation, unequaled in all of world history. That means things could be in the near future that are greater than World War II, greater than, the plague, greater than the Inquisition, and things like that. So I think these are pretty significant things to consider. And again, this article will be linked in the description of this video, including a previous video I did here. Let's read from Daniel 12. Now, Daniel, just like the book of Revelation, is talking about the last days, and often the two are parallel with one another, and it takes a little bit of study to understand that. This is from Daniel 12, verses 1 through 4. It says, at that time Michael, and some believe that is a representation of the Messiah, shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never since there was a nation, even to that time. And even at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. It says that death is asleep. People don't die and go to heaven like we're falsely taught. They actually rest until Judgment Day, and everyone is judged at the same time. Little side note there. Some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting shame and contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness, disciples of Jesus encouraging people to repent, will be like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall turn to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Some believe turning to and fro refers to air travel that now people are able to do in the last days since Daniel, and knowledge shall increase. We can pretty much look up anything in 1 second on the internet, which is pretty profound. Now, some people occasionally ask me about, well, what is there to do? So I'm going to read this email I've sent out to some friends of mine. It says this: friends, a flat tire only happens about 1 out of 1,500 car trips. Yet, would you go out without a spare tire and jack? According to my years of recent study, there is at least a 1 in 3 chance that a major global tribulation of some kind is in the near future, in which half of the world's population or more may die in a very short period of time. Even secular atheist forecasters think so. Economic collapse, meteor storms, World War III are just a few possibilities. To me, these are very sobering odds of you and your loved ones being caught in the middle of something very terrible. My motto is, better to have something you don't need than to need something you don't have. The patriarch Joseph and his family were protected from 7 years of famine, not because God dropped food from the heavens each day, rather from having divine foresight into a coming tribulation, for which he very diligently and immediately prepared. Here's a list of things I recommend to acquire in preparation for this 1 in 3 chance or greater of a near future worldwide catastrophe. Canned goods. Canned goods last for many years past the expiration date. In fact, someone at a food lab at the FDA opened a can of ham that had been sitting on the shelf for 40 years, and it was edible. Extra can openers. Don't want to be stuck with that. Salt, very important, and I believe iodized sea salt is the best. You're going to need that. Without salt, people will eventually become delirious, and they won't be able to think properly. Yeast-free crackers, those are called matzah or Passover crackers, chewing gum, mints, etc. Here's something I found. Regular beans, that you find, the cheapest ones like the red beans in the store, I was reminded that they need to be soaked overnight and then cooked for an extremely long period of time. If there's to be cooking of food during the tribulation period, you don't want to draw attention to yourself. Probably cook at night if you're using a wood-burning stove or fireplace so that the smoke won't be seen. And then you want to cook things as quickly as possible. So regular beans are not good for that. Lentils, as a matter of fact, do not need to be soaked, and they can cook in less than an hour. They're very high in protein and fiber, one of the highest of beans, maybe the highest, and they have an indefinite shelf life. White rice, even though brown rice is better for you, has an indefinite shelf life. A wood-burning stove or chimney to go out a nearby window. It may be very cold due to rampant volcanic ash everywhere in the atmosphere, and fires if there's meteor storms in the future. So again, we talked about, I think last week, that while global warming was true for a limited period of time, we have now entered a solar minimum, which is going to cause very cold temperatures beginning now and into the future. You can check Craigslist for a wood-burning stove, potbelly stove, something like that, and a used one is much cheaper and they're virtually the same quality. Lots of manual, non-battery tools like saws and screwdrivers and things like that. I even have a screwdriver. It's kind of a corkscrew. It's about 1.5 feet long. It kind of threads it for you as you push it in. Lots of duct tape, lots of toilet paper, Band-Aids, toothbrushes, toothpaste, hand soap, bleach, cleaning supplies, lighters, shavers, Q-tips, baking soda, etc. Lots of multivitamins, age and gender specific. Stock up on any prescription medicine that you may be having. What you might do now is taper off of it at a doctor's authorization or at least consultation, and start rationing now so you have a stockpile of it in the future if pharmacies are closed. Walkie-talkies would be handy. Battery-powered radios, and then lots of batteries. Maybe 1 to 3 year supply. Congress has been talking a lot about an EMP, electromagnetic pulse caused by a solar storm or terrorist attack or false flag that could fry the power grid indefinitely, living without electricity until you probably die of old age. So you have to take that into consideration. And if the earth is getting colder, then you might, even though your climate may not suggest it at the moment, get thermal underwear, gloves, face masks, and to prepare for the extreme cold. Ways to protect yourself and your family. You fortify your entryways. You buy pepper spray. A very cheap alternative to that is wasp spray. It shoots out a very straight mist, and if you shot that in an intruder's eyes, it would virtually have the same effect as pepper spray. Start networking with neighbors that you can trust to look out for each other and to have a community. People talk about bugging out, and I really don't think that's a good idea. I think you're better off just bugging in, having your fort, having your supplies and comforts there, and doing the best that you can. Use every inch of your home to store something useful. Water first, food second, lighting and batteries third, security items fourth. Try to hide all the supplies out of sight of visitors. Lots of bottled water. Use water filters first, and we'll get into that in a minute. Only use bottled water when it's not safe to go outside to collect water for your filter from either gunshots outside, or if there's, for whatever reason, volcanic ash or meteor ash in the rivers, it will turn it red, as the Bible Revelation prophesies. Shortly thereafter, in Revelation, people get boils on their skin. I believe that's from drinking water contaminated with meteor or volcanic ash, which is high in iron. It will make you very sick, but it won't kill you. And then Revelation talks about that too. People seeking death after the boils, but they will not be able to find it. You can distill water, that will remove it, or you can just drink your supply of bottled water during this period. It's supposed to clear up in about 6 weeks, and then you can retrieve water again. You should have at least 3 months of bottled water per person, 1/2 a gallon per day minimum. There is actually a formula if you want to make note of it. If you weigh 200 pounds, you cut that figure in half to 100, and that's what you're supposed to need in ounces of water, and that would be slightly less than a gallon. If you cut it in half again to 50 ounces, that would probably be a reasonable ration period to survive on, a ration amount, if you don't have a lot of strenuous activity. Plastic tubs or trash cans for washing clothing and collecting and storing water. Prepare again for no water and no electricity for a very long time. Have your mindset so that if this happens, you won't be, shocked by it. Now, here's a claimed water system that I highly recommend, and something that's important. I recommend having two, either to share it or to have one as a backup if there is a malfunction. This is called the Life Straw Family Water Filter. Now, if you click on this link, it will take you here to Amazon, and it will give you a little bit of detail about it here if you want to look at it real quick. It says it is award-winning. Over 13 million people are using it. It is good enough for a family of 4 to last 3 years. It's a gravity filter. It doesn't need any electricity. You pour in the water at the top, and it comes out clean at the bottom. Follow, of course, the directions. You can put in here, water contaminated with manure, and it will come out completely drinkable. It purifies nearly 5,000 gallons or 18,000 liters without iodine, chlorine, or other chemicals. It won scientific awards. It surpasses the EPA standards, which I'm sure that's not too difficult to do. Removes 99.99 of viruses and 99.9999 of bacteria, which is the main thing for drinking, water outside. Again, if the water's contaminated with radiation or, iron, the only way to remove that is by distilling the water or drinking your bottled water until that time passes. Again, only use bottled water for if it's not safe to go outside for whatever reason. And until then, retrieve water from rain or lakes or sewers even. With this filter, it will become completely drinkable. Here's a personal Life Straw filter. Again, these links will be in the description of this video. And this is portable for a backpack. It's like a big 1 foot long straw, and you can, put it into the actual water source, use it as a straw, and it does about 250 gallons. Here's a very good flashlight that I like a lot. It's a pen light. It sells at Walmart for about $3, a little more than $5 on Amazon. Comes with a battery, and it has an extremely good lens on it, meaning it magnifies the light incredibly. It is very conservative on power, and it uses an LED light. Now, with anything with an LED, there's a computer chip in it, and you should store this wrapped in aluminum foil, heavy-duty aluminum foil, a couple of times in the innermost room of your house to protect the LED circuit from a solar storm. You might do that with your walkie-talkies and electronics as well. Here's a great rechargeable battery pack right here. Here's a solar battery charger. Again, I'll put these, here's a solar one for your phone if somehow electricity is out but cell phones still work. It'll store phone power, which you can tap into your phone, and then you can recharge it in the sun. Here's a 12-volt recharger if you have any 12-volt batteries for auxiliary power supply. Here are little adapters that can convert various battery sizes, AAA to AA, and then there's AA to D and so forth, so that your batteries are interchangeable. I've stocked up a lot of, because I'm studying natural health, on herbs and things that you can basically use to cure almost any ailment. Some believe even Ebola and things like that. That would be elderberry root power, echinacea. Let me click on show the full message here. Garlic powder, very, very significant. Turmeric, ginger. Here's a way that you can buy these 2 1/2 ounce silver bars, and you can make your own colloidal silver. You can go online to see how to do that. That's a natural antibiotic that you can make from distilled water in a glass or ceramic container. Here's a tablet that can help, I believe, get rid of the plague. Here's one to help get rid of Ebola. Here's a natural remedy for Ebola. Here's gloves in case you have to, remove dead bodies from your neighborhood or treat somebody who's, very sick. You don't want to contaminate yourself. You can have a temperature gauge. There's also blood pressure gauges. You want to have a really good first aid kit. Stethoscope in case you have to determine whether someone is still around or not. CPR mask so that you can give someone CPR without being contaminated by touching them. There's a substance called Quick Clot, and I found out that the active ingredient is called colon clay, which is much cheaper. You can buy that and just pour it on a wound, and it should stop it from bleeding fairly quickly. Butterfly bandages, other type of bandages, things like this. Minor little military kit for cutting and trauma, things like that. Here's, if things get too bad, you have a more serious injury. Here's a sanitized skin stapler remover. Potassium tablets in case there's radiation. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but during a power outage, half of the nuclear power plants in America, which is about 100 of them, do not generate their own power. It's one directional to the power grid. So they have their own generators to power themselves when there's a power failure. But those generators only have 2 to 4 weeks of diesel fuel, and once that runs out, the rods will not be able to be cooled anymore, and they will have a meltdown. This will be going on in at least half of the nuclear power plants in our country and around the world if there's a power outage or a meteor storm, and there will be lots of radioactive material floating around the atmosphere. Apple pectin also gets rid of radioactive material in you. Growing sprouts. Sprouts are one of the most vitamin nutrient substances you can have, and this way, aside from rice, beans, and canned goods, you can have some actually live vegetables, if you call it that, that don't require sunlight. And so here's a great method for growing them inside. Here's a pack of alfalfa seeds, and broccoli seeds are the healthiest. And then here's a colleague wrote this book, The Prepper's Blueprint. Highly recommend this book. Again, all this will be linked in the description of this video as room permits. Here's a book on natural healing. Here's a book having to do with the last days. That's pretty fascinating. Another first aid manual, a book on missing texts from the Bible if you like studying the Bible. And here are some security items for making your doors and windows a little bit more secure. Pepper spray and the likes, a whistle, a bullhorn, knife sharpener, way to do laundry manually, cooking, and so forth. Pray, I say, that we never have to use this stuff and laugh later about being over-prepared. Unfortunately, nevertheless, my gut tells me bad times are ahead. Be sure to be safe, prepared for anything and everything, spiritually first, and then physically second. And then lastly, I will link the article about the rogue planet possibility, which certainly seems to be increasing every day with scientific revelations saying that Planet X does in fact exist. This has been Brother Bart's Conspiracy Corner News, episode 37. Are you prepared for eternity? Please tell your friends, share the link, give me a YouTube thumbs up if you like this video, and be sure to read the full Sleuth Journal article on this topic, linked in the description of this video. And most of all, thank you for your kind and generous support. This is the reason why they're bringing it up, but just like I pointed out, I don't think they would tell everyone in the country to stockpile food and water for 5 to 10 days because of a terrorist attack or crazy teenagers. I think the real reason is this, and they're really just not going into detail about it. It goes on to say a spokesperson for the Interior Ministry said the plan would be discussed by the Cabinet on Wednesday and presented by the minister that afternoon. He declined to give any details on the content. People will be required to stockpile enough drinking water to last 5 days. Little contradictory. I think they said 10 days earlier. According to the plan, the paper said the 69-page report does not see an attack on Germany's territory, which would require a conventional style of national defense as likely. Okay. However, the precautionary measure. Greetings, friends and countrymen. Welcome to Conspiracy Corner News, episode 37. This is Bart Sabrell. Conspiracy Corner News briefly highlights the week's most significant and underreported news events throughout the world, focusing on special preparation for the difficult times ahead for all mankind. And that, again, is the topic of this week. I noticed the story nearly a week ago and was saving it for today because I only do a weekly report. And I was very proud to see my other alternative media colleagues catch the story, and they have certainly been sharing it around the web, and I think it is highly significant. Let's take a look at it. It says here, Germany to tell people to stockpile food and water in case of attack by the Interior Ministry. First, let's look at some of the hints here. They say in case of an attack or catastrophe. And then they talk about an unstable teenager last month. Certainly, they're not telling the entire population of the country of Germany to stockpile food and water for several days, going on 2 weeks, because of unstable teenagers. I don't think even Islamic attacks, which may happen once a month and still regrettably kills a couple of people, I don't think that would be the reason why they would tell the entire population to stockpile food and water for 5 to 10 days. I think this is the true reason here, catastrophe. Now they're bringing it up and saying this. For the first time since the end of the Cold War, the German government plans to tell citizens to stockpile food and water in case of an attack or catastrophe, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung newspaper reported on Sunday. Germany is currently on high alert after 2 Islamic attacks and a shooting rampage by a mentally unstable teenager last month. Berlin announced measures earlier this month to spend considerably more on its police and security forces to create a special unit to counter cybercrime and terrorism. The population will be obliged to hold an individual supply of food for 10 days. The newspaper quoted the government's concept for civil defense, which has been prepared by demand the people prepare appropriately for development, which means a future event that they predict, that they're not going into detail about, that could threaten our existence, threaten the existence of the entire country of Germany, and cannot be categorically ruled out in the future. So this is something we really need to take note of. You may remember last week and the weeks before we talked about how FEMA and the United States government is preparing for some sort of an emergency. They're not going into detail as to what it is. They don't want everyone to panic, and they don't want the stock market to crash prematurely. So they're just kind of hinting at it. And now at least Germany is being forthright about what to tell their citizens. Now here's a quote